I'm Colleen. I'm heading up the Coley project, which is like collecting interviews and information on like losing a sibling. And you are
Cynthia Douglas Ibarra.
awesome, cool. Well, thank you again for meeting up and talking today.
You bet.
Yeah, so I guess, like I said, what the first thing we'll start off with is I'll just let you, kind of talk at your comfort level, or to what degree you want to go into stuff. But yeah, basically we want to talk about your sibling, and then you can start in that journey wherever you like.
Well, I have a large family, for modern times anyway, I guess. I have a sister that's 12 years older, a brother that's 8 years older. My sister Debbie was 5 years older than I am, and then I have a younger sister who is 2 years younger. And so I was calculating this. I can't believe it's been like 40 some years, 42 years, I think. My sister Debbie committed suicide in 1981. It was I was 16. I'm still trying to kind of calculate this because in my mind I was 15 and she was 20, but I think I was 16 and she was 20 or 21. It's still kind of a blur, which is really interesting. I have her death certificate still in my possession. I was looking for it this morning, and I think I moved it out into my work area, which is a she shed, actually. And because I was doing some writing about her suicide and its impact on me. So 1981, and it was really, I think the biggest impact was my mom was in the middle of moving, and did not stop that process when she found out my sister had killed herself. And which I thought was like bizarre. I mean, so there was never any, for me, there was never any closure, like a funeral or a memorial service would have kind of helped me process her death. And that never happened. So I still feel like it's incomplete for me. And it's ironic, and I'm okay sharing this. I was actually at the regional center. I was in the regional center, not in adolescence. I was in adult. My psychologist arranged it that way because I had been on my own. I had been a ward of the state and on my own for several years. So essentially, I was an adult, emancipated. So they put me in an adult unit at the regional center in the 1980s, 1981. So I was actually there when she committed suicide, and for a suicide attempt, which kind of affected my whole trajectory after that, in terms of there was never another attempt after she had committed suicide, and I really kind of have honored that. I mean, now I get the blues or whatever. I have a lot of I'm pretty labile sometimes, so I take a mood stabilizer medication that helps me kind of be more even. But I've never been in a place again, I don't think, where I have thought about committing suicide. So, but that's all really convoluted in terms of my ability to kind of process her death. And I think, again, that has to do with my parents' inability to process her death. So that kind of, I know my oldest sister and my mom went up to Ukiah in California. That's where my sister died. And like had her cremated, but I don't know where where they put her ashes. I don't know any of that. So that still really bothers me a lot, basically. I feel like I was my sister was silly and fun, but she was also really mean and cruel. She could be really mean and cruel, and that's because she had alcohol and drug addiction, cocaine addiction, and alcohol addiction, which I think when you're in your right mind, generally speaking, that you're not going to commit suicide. I think that blurred the line between, what she could have, how she could have reached out for help. But so that kind of that kind of relationship with somebody who can be abusive, but is your family, and somebody you love and somebody who loves you, is also very complicating through this process.
Yeah, I don't feel like I've ever seen with really any sort of loss, whether it is sibling or parent or anything. You would think like having someone do awful things or whatever would make it simpler, easier, like, oh, I'm done with them. But instead, it really just adds these like layers of feelings that you have to sort through. And yeah, no, I think that's a really, that's very, very across the board, the experience with that sort of thing for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think she got, she was sexually assaulted. I remember this really clearly too. Her sitting at the kitchen table in this pink robe. I've written about this kind of extensively, and kind of her head wrapped up, and she went to some guy's house to watch a movie, and he hit her over the head with some kind of bat or pipe or something and sexually assaulted her. And my feeling at the time was, my mom was like, that's what girls get, basically. So the messages kind of aimed at my sister were not very positive. And then we grew up in a household with a stepfather who was also physically and sexually abusive. So those things compounded, like her death. I mean, obviously, some people can work through things like that, but other people don't have the means to. And again, I think if she wasn't using drugs or alcohol, her story would have been very different. She was really talented. She was a piano player. So every time, like, the mall was a big thing back in the day, in my generation, basically. And we would go to the mall, and there were a lot of piano stores, not just Dietz or, I don't know, the guitar store, but like big piano stores you don't see them anymore, right? In stores. But she would go in and play, and she was really, really quite amazing. It was really fun. She was very talented in that way. She was also kind of like a hippie. I remember her in a beret and those long, like, hippie skirts, and she had this wonderful leather beaded jacket. I had it for a lot of years, and I don't know what happened to it. Somehow I lost that jacket, but it was really cool. It was beaded. It was leather with fringe on it. That always reminded me of her. And I still wish I had that one. I feel like that was one thing I had, that I could, like, that was physical, and that I could hold on to. I do have a picture of her at Tijuana Tilly's, which is probably some border bar in Tijuana, obviously, because we lived in San Diego. That's where I grew up. And she's sitting with the waiters behind her and a couple of her friends. And again, she's wearing that beret, and she looks really happy and beautiful. So those are things that I kind of hang on to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess kind of along those lines, how has then that grief like evolved, and what has helped? Like when either you have a grief wave, or just what has helped, like, or or I guess also you kind of hinted at stuff that hasn't helped, like not getting, closure. So I
Mm.
guess, yeah, kind of what is that journey, that journey been like?
Well, I do a lot of writing. I think I've written like a lot of vignettes about it, like her life and what happened to her, and my imagining like her sitting, um, drinking her last beer and contemplating suicide, and that kind of thing. I think just not knowing, not having a note, not knowing what her state of mind was, that's really hard. Not, I don't think I was in a position at 16 years old to, um, I mean, I could have helped her if she called me, but I don't think as a 16-year-old, when you think about it, you're not in a position to really reach out. I think the grieving process is also difficult because I know that coming up to her suicide, her actual suicide, she had tried crashing her car and she went to the hospital and they didn't keep her. So I was like, that seemed irresponsible to me. I'm a nurse, and I work at the VA hospital. So I know when people come in and they have suicidal ideation, they're on a one-to-one and they're kept there until they feel like they're stable enough to go home. So that makes it difficult. Every time there's like a walk for suicide or something like that, I feel like I should participate, but I don't participate. It's really strange for me. I don't know why I am so like drawn to it, but also don't want to deal with it. Like there's a bike ride, I think, on Saturday on the Wabash Trail that it's a mental health ride. It's like, right, it's called the Ride with Mike, and he does it every year, and it's just to raise awareness about mental health. And I feel like, you know what, and the VA does a lot of stuff around suicide prevention, and I'm like, you know what, I should do this and honor her that way. Like this can happen to anybody, and so all of those things kind of complicate like my grieving process, and it's always like uh it's always kind of shocking that it was like 42 or 45 years ago. I can't do the math, but it was a long time. It was a lifetime ago. This is somebody's lifetime. Um, so that's kind of hard to grapple with as well. So I feel like there was a point, there was in Lincoln years and years ago, uh, there was a kind of like a suicide memorial thing that I went to, but again, I didn't like verbalize her name. People were verbalizing, their loss, and I did not do that. So, but it has been acknowledged. Like when I believe I was 17, and I had a couple of friends that gave me a card. I was just on the cusp of 16, 17, turning 17, in memorializing my sister. So that those things help, like being able to talk about her, being able to write about her, um, talking about her with my family. I don't do that so much, but that might help. I don't know. I'm kind of like not super close to certain family members, but like I remember, okay, so my brother one time told somebody that she died in a car accident, and I was pissed off. I was like, no, this was a long time ago. I don't know that, I think he was embarrassed. I think he didn't know how people would respond to it, because that's pretty like, how do people respond to loss in general? Not very well in our culture, right? So responding to suicide is even worse, I think. So
Yeah, yeah, I was, when I, in the other interviews that's come up, like it's, when people even say, oh, I've lost a sibling, it can be like a freeze response anyway. And yeah, I think with suicide, I don't know if it is, like you said, it can happen to anyone. If it's like almost like a, oh, I don't want to hear about it. If it's just, if people, yeah, there is like, I've noticed that when had friends that have experienced suicide, talk to someone else about it, and you'll see their reaction, and it's
Mm.
yeah, no. So I believe that has to be hard when you want to be able to just like talk about your life experience, and then people's reaction,
Right,
oh my god, like um
right.
Um, no, I think that's interesting what you said about with talking to your family about it, because I don't know if you've had this experience, but I know me and some of the other people I've talked to, it almost feel like sometimes grief acts as like this Tower of Babel kind of thing in a family where you're suddenly just not speaking the same language to each other. You're just not on the same page anymore. It's like because grief is such an individual experience that yeah, no, it's almost like you end up sometimes bonding with either strangers or friends in a way.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes too painful with family, especially I mean, my parents lost their child. And I don't ever remember my dad or my mom talking about it. Um, except like I said, my mom was like moving that weekend. Nothing stopped. It was just like it wasn't important. That's how it felt to me. It's like, why isn't my dad then picking up the ball? They were divorced when I was like a year old. So, or why can't this stop? And we acknowledge, I wanted to process it. I wanted people to talk about it. I mean, I was in Nebraska. I think my mom was in Phoenix. My grandmother was in California, but I was in Nebraska when this happened at the regional center, like I said. But, I feel like they had the agency and the responsibility to acknowledge this. I mean, I don't know. I think maybe people do shut down. I don't think it's just suicide, just the loss of their child. Um, that's significant, I think, for people. So
Oh, for sure, yeah. um there is apparently what someone was one of my writer friends was telling me that there is a book. I think it's a book called A Hole in the Language, because there's a term for a
mm,
child that loses your parents, but not for your parents that lose your child. I don't know. I was just when you said there's not like a word, you said that, before we got on here, that, there's not really a word for when you lose a sibling. And I realized we have a pretty big dearth in the English language for these
yeah.
very big losses.
Well, I think, and maybe if we looked at other languages, we would find that. But yeah, I think we don't deal with grief. I mean, it's always there. Like it's always there. I think about it around this time of year because it was like June 15th. It was right before Father's Day. She had sent out a card see, this is like the stuff I really remember. She sent my dad and my grandfather a card right before all of this happened. So it was like, even more compounding, like what, what? Somebody thinks about sending Father's Day cards while they're in the process of committing suicide. Not exactly at the same time, but they got that card on the weekend and she died, I think, on June 15th. So, you know, it's those are the things that I remember, like my mom not, my mom not stopping to acknowledge, my father just kind of burying his head in the sand. Um, just being in the regional center under suicide watch myself. So it was like, a lot going on. And I actually uh, flew out to San Francisco. My oldest sister lived in San Francisco and kind of hung out with her for a little while. I was still a patient. This would never happen now. This was 1981, so it was a different world. But I flew out to California to see my sister, and I don't remember what we did around my about Debbie's death. I don't think we did much. Maybe we talked about her. I think that's when she gave me that leather fringed beaded jacket of my sister's, actually. So that happened, but I don't remember, like, we didn't drive up to Ukiah. We didn't talk about where her ashes were scattered or any of that. So those are the things that really kind of stand out in my mind. But I don't know, it's still like 40 some years. It's still kind of unbelievable. I'm like, no way, that much time has not passed, but it has.
Yeah, and it does have this weird yeah, distorting effect. I was thinking about that. My the anniversary of my brother's death is at the end of May. It's been 7 years, and 7 years feels like a minute and an eternity. Like, especially, I don't know for you, if like I feel like the pandemic also distorted everyone's
Oh yeah.
perception of time, so that certainly hasn't helped. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
but no, I believe, like, whether it's 7 years, 40 years, I think, like, yeah, I think such a significant loss. It, like, I don't know, it just keeps resonating over time. So, you know,
Yeah, especially around the time of the anniversary. Like I wasn't really thinking about it like a lot. And then this interview came up and I'm like, oh my God, it's June. And she committed suicide around the 15th. So which is always like, okay, yeah, I think about it around there, around that time. Also significant events in my own life, like, oh, who would I want to share this with? Or when I'm listening to certain music or things like that. But I just think there's always an overlying, overarching kind of theme of loss without really thinking about it, you know?
yeah, no, absolutely. Um, what is there? Are there things that you have found, like, or that you had like wished? So it sounds like, having some kind of like closure, or having people actually talk about it at the time would have been helpful. But is there anything else, like, when it first happened, you remember thinking, oh man, I wish there was this, whether it's a certain type of resource or a certain type of support? Do you remember anything particular that jumped out?
Um, Well, my situation is different because I was at the regional center. So they immediately put me on suicide watch. And I was like, that's kind of like the last thing I would do, but I guess that's what they do. And, so I had counselors there. I talked to my mom and my grandmother on the phone. And, I just, I don't know. I don't think there was anything that could have like helped in that moment. It was really surreal. And I was trying to be kind of a hard ass about it at the time because that was kind of my modus operandi. I was kind of like hard, but I wasn't really. And I think that's how I tried to like shrug it off. Like, I remember I almost feel like the psychologist was playing a game with me because I got called down into the psychologist's office and he's like, how would you feel if somebody in your family died? I'm like, I wouldn't really like care about it. And then he put me on the phone with my mom and my grandmother who were like, your sister killed herself. And that's how I remember it. Now maybe it didn't happen that way, but that is how I remember that the news happening. So I think it would have been more appropriate for him to have like told me what was happening and then put me on the phone with my mom and my grandmother. But um again, I don't know. I don't think anything would have helped at that point in time. Like being able to go to San Francisco and attend my first it was in June or July. It had to be in the end of June that I went like a couple weeks later, which was amazing from the hospital and then going back to the hospital. Like they let me have this period of time, maybe a week or something. And I went to my first gay pride parade, which was really fun at 16 years old, you know. So, but, again, there's this thing like she's missing. I'll never get to talk to her again. Like I said, we had a lot of fun doing music and listening to her play music and those things, I'll never get that back again. So I don't know. Resources, again, because my situation is so weird being at the regional center, it's like all the resources are thrown at me. But I don't know that they help. I think what would have really helped is had my family, be real about this. Like, let's talk about this. Let's process this together. Let's be a family. But that's not how my family works, unfortunately.
No, no, that makes total sense. Um, and then I guess like are have you found or like met a lot of people that have lost siblings, or do you find that like if if you do know people, it doesn't come out until later? Like I guess kind of what has your experience been with like finding others that have been in a similar position?
Not not a lot. I mean, if I get close to somebody and they talk about like somebody in their family that has lost a sibling. I had a friend in nursing school. One of her siblings died, not by her own hand, but um God, I think they were twins. I almost think that. I don't know, or maybe her sister was a pair of twins or something, um but it doesn't just, you know what I'm saying? It's not, I don't know. It's not, if I went to a grief group or something like that, I would expect to find people who've lost siblings, but you know, um, yeah, no, a few people, but not anything significant really.
No, that makes it. It was just kind of one of those things I noticed after my brother died. And if I mentioned like, oh yeah, I had the funeral, like especially right after, you're talking about just like things like, oh, I went to the funeral or whatever. Then it came out from a few of my friends that they had lost siblings. But yeah, it was one of those things that just in all the personal sharing or of life events just did not come up. So yeah, I
That
didn't.
don't, yeah, it's interesting. I don't think it's, yeah, in writing groups, I think it comes up because it's, if you're writing narrative nonfiction anyway, maybe if you're writing fiction or science fiction, it won't come up, but narrative nonfiction, or I've been in the Seven Doctors Project, for example. Um, so in those places, you're encouraged, to write about the things that are real, and that has always been something. I mean, I feel like I've been writing about it since it happened, and I'm not done yet, or haven't found the right way to like write about it or something. I don't know what it is. It's just really hard to put it down on paper. I mean, it's down on paper, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, I haven't done anything with it yet. So,
No, I think there are certain topics. I think that's almost like the thing of being a writer. There are certain topics or certain things that it's like you're just like an excavation process or something, or sorting because it is like there's certain things that are just I think so hard to write about, or so hard to figure out what you want to say about them. And
right.
obviously huge loss like that at the yeah, like that's definitely I feel like falls into that kind of category of like yeah, just continuously wrapping your brain around it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I mean, that's never gone away. I've always kind of written about her and about the situation and the things that she had gone through. I think just so I can have some kind of understanding of her thought process and why she would have taken her own life,
Yeah.
even though I was in this very, very similar situation, so I just, um, yeah, it's hard not knowing what she was thinking about, how, if she felt lonely or, abandoned or whatever. And she wasn't. There were people around her that really cared about her.
Um, so is there like anything that I always like to ask if there's anything in particular you would want to share either about her or a message you would want to give to other people that have lost a sibling?
Well, I don't think it ever gets easier, but I do think we just learn to live with the loss. I don't think, like in any grieving process, I think it doesn't it becomes more distant, I guess. but it's always there. And not, I mean, I don't want to say don't despair. I think it's okay to despair and to feel sad, and even to feel sad for the rest of your life about this kind of a loss. Just, be gentle with yourself is what I would say, and allow yourself to feel everything that you're feeling and going through, and that there are other people who have gone through what you have gone through, and maybe to try to find those folks so you can, so you can process. I think that even though however way that your brother was taken out of this world, we still have that commonality that we've lost a sibling, lost a brother or sister, and that we can talk, we can relate on some level about that.
Yeah. No, that makes that, yeah, I think that's a great insight. Yeah. I'm trying to think I don't think there's any other particular questions I had. Yeah, are there any other final thoughts you want to share?
No, thank you again, for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you. I really appreciate it. I think this process is actually really helpful as well. So I think that, you're not a therapist. Well, maybe you are, I don't know, but,
Yeah.
but, but this is therapeutic in a way, to be able to say these things to somebody. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, thank you. No, it's been really great getting to talk to people, and yeah, and I'm always, like I said, always very, very honored when people are willing to share, like part of their personal lives with, a stranger. So no, thank you.